Hey everyone, Brian Von Via here, back at it again. I hope everybody's doing well and that all of you out there are staying safe. That being said, let me entertain you tonight with what was the funniest wild magic instance for your sorcerer, part 2. Ah yes, mild spoilers for Tomb of Annihilation ahead. Apologies if I get some details wrong. It's been over a year since we finished it. I, some friends, and my sister were playing Tomb of Annihilation, as suggested just now. Among our ranks as a necromancer with a long history of messing with the other party members in various ways, with whom our sorcerer has developed a bit of a rivalry with. We're in the middle of combat against a bunch of undead. We're tired, since we barely managed to survive a trap not long before. Our dear necromancer casts Fireball, whether out of exhaustion or apathy we may never know, and kills off all but 2 enemies. As always, our sorcerer, in an attempt to outdo the other caster, casts his own Fireball at a higher level. Him being wild magic, we hand him the trusty die. His player shrugs and rolls nonchalantly. What's the worst that could happen? As per expected in such a threat as this, he rolls a 1. The look of horror on everyone's faces as our sorcerer turns into a pot of petunias must have been incredibly entertaining. That is, everyone save our necromancer, of course. She wears the grin of a devil on her face. "I pick up the pot," she declares after combat ends. She'd made an Arcana check and succeeded with a 27 just before, so she knows exactly what is going on. "Break it," says our sorcerer. She smiles sweetly. "No," is her only answer. His shock and anger was nearly palpable, but maybe that was just his sweaty hands because I was seated right next to him. He turned to me next. "You're the bard," he says. "Convince her to break the pot." I, of course, deny his request. I had an inkling of an idea as to what she wanted to do with it, but nothing concrete. Besides, I tell him that's metagaming. I don't know your pot needs to be broken, and I can't make that sort of check on her anyway. And so it is. Over the next few in-game days, our lovely necromancer protects that pot like she would her own phylactery, if she were a lich. I'm not sure if she was or not, honestly. It wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. Needless to say, our sorcerer is seething. He can't do anything until that pot is broken. And all of us present at the time knew that there would be player homicide should that pot be broken. We said nothing. Eventually, we come to a winding staircase. It dug straight into the ground, further than any of us could see. At this point in the dungeon, most of us have begun to figure out that charging headfirst into deep, mysterious staircases isn't the best idea. And so, our necromancer proposes an idea. Oh no, I can see where this is going. "Can I drop something down the hole to see how deep it is?" she asks our DM, a physics major. He agrees wholeheartedly. "There's rubble scattered all over the place here," he says. "Take your pick." "No thanks," she says as she pulls out the plant. Our sorcerer's mouth drops wide open. Our DM's eyes widen. She smiles sweetly. "I'm gonna drop it now." Our DM nods slowly. "You drop the pot down the stairwell. It shatters like glass at the bottom some 3 seconds later."
"And how deep would that be?"
"X feet, because I don't remember the original number. I don't want to ask, and I'm not about to calculate it myself." She nods and continues smiling as our DM turns to our sorcerer. He claps his hands together. "Orin," he says, "you wake up at the bottom of a very large pit. You see 3 figures in the distance looking down at you. They look vaguely humanoid, but it's pretty dim so it's hard to tell. Surrounding you are a trio of 4-armed gargoyles. Roll for initiative." That rivalry is better than Goku and Vegeta's, holy crap. We were sneaking into a dragon cave to steal treasure, made a stealth check, decided to do Tides of Chaos. The way it works in our group is you instantly roll on the table for it. And got you glow-blinding light. Had to fight a dragon. Homebrew campaigns with a wild magic sorcerer can get ridiculous. Within the span of 3 rotations, I managed to annihilate 3/4 of the enemy because of pentacasting, turn our fighter into a skeleton, which in turn led our paladin into killing him, and, of course, ended up turning myself into a sentient slice of bread. This was an AD&D. I was playing a homebrew wild mage, flavored as more of a sorcerer than a wizard. A huge fight had broken out in a market in the plains. We botched a plan to sneak in and capture one of the black market trade leaders, a djinn. He was at the back of this circular dome thing, so to get a clear line of sight, I called out I would run up the stairs of this little tower, and I was preparing to fireball him. That could never go wrong. Team acknowledged the plan. I go for a smoke. Then our wizard, who we had just spent 3 months trying to resurrect, casts grease as the whole team ran into the center of the platform to confront the djinn. I come back and DM smiles at me and asks me, what do I do? I ask if I have reached the top of the tower. He nods. Well, then you know what I do. Other PCs start to object, but the DM roll to check if I surge. I do. Roll percentile. Boom. Double range. Double AoE. Double damage. I roll for damage and hit max damage. Grease erupts into a secondary explosion. DM does a little John Travolta impression of the djinn as he looks at the bodies of my party on the platform that I've turned into an embassy of the Plane of Fire. The next week I played solo with my own little quest to fix that fuck up. DMing a homebrew campaign, and the party's current objective is to, of course, find the MacGuffins from various identical-looking vaults. The party has some very experienced players, so I have to prepare for anything. So I have it in my notes that if a player happens to be smart enough to cast Speak with Plants, the mushrooms in the vaults would reveal the secrets connecting them. Cue the magic wild sorcerer trademark, finishing off the boss and triggering a surge on the final hit. What does he trigger? Of course, Speak with Plants. So our little half-gnome, half-elf with an intelligence of 6 -2 gets to chatting with the mushrooms, during which I give my lecture on the secret of the vaults, which, keep in mind, only he can hear. His response to endgame levels of information dump? Yeah. Who gives a shit about all of that? Just tell me which ones of you are poisonous and which ones taste good. The rest of the party now has to strive to avoid metagaming, as he never told them, and almost instantly forgot everything the mushrooms said. We were fighting Tiamat in a one-shot. My friend's character had an ability that made him roll wild magic whenever he takes damage, so, of course, he rolls a fireball after getting hit. He erupts into flames and has to roll again and summons a unicorn. However, since the DM can summon the unicorn wherever they want, it spawns 5 feet above his PC, falls on him, and he takes damage. He gets fireballed again, then casts grease only to trip, take damage again, and fireballs himself while covered in grease. Tiamat just stared in disbelief as this man explodes himself into oblivion. DM had made a truly awe-inspiring wild magic chart. He had a D100 chart telling him which D100 result list would occur. It would only trigger on nat 1s. On a cast of feather falling, our wild mage summoned an entire guard tower from a nearby town under his feet. We all walked down the stairs after that. Bro, I should have written one for this. Surprise, surprise, you just made part 2. Welcome. I have a great one. I've written it before and I plan on making a video telling the story, but I'll write it again here. Ooh, so exciting. Our party was preparing to fight an adult black dragon, and our monk, who was wearing the dragon's sun as a homebrew sash, was trash-talking the dragon. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was brutal. The tabaxi fighter/rogue was wearing the son of the dragon as armor too, so it was risky. However, the drow wild magic sorcerer had used a spell to prepare for the fight and rolled on the wild magic table and got an effect that had him grow a third eye. More on that later. Next in the first round, the sorcerer used his boots of flying and flew up to the lip of the cave the dragon was in and casted invisibility on himself. He rolled again on the wild magic table and got the effect where he cast fireball centered on himself. After taking the damage, he succeeded his concentration check to stay invisible. So all the party saw was his spontaneously explode with nothing left. it gets better. The party was basically bullying the dragon, and when it came to the sorcerer's turn, he flew in and casted Chromatic Orb and ended up finishing off the dragon. He rolled on the wild magic table and temporarily became a size category larger. That's when a bunch of kobolds in hiding darted in and screamed, "We surrender!" The sorcerer jokingly said,
"I'm your god now."
So I had him roll persuasion. He got over a 20, so the kobolds who saw a large three-eyed dark elf appear out of nowhere and slay their black dragon leader with some spell they don't understand are now following that drow, calling him their new
Dark Lord.
They still follow him to this day, even though that campaign ended. Oh my, I have one, finally. This was from a homebrew campaign from many years ago, and likely doesn't fit standard wild mage rules. I'll try to remember as best as I can. Our party consisted of 3 player characters, a human thief, a human cleric, and me, a half-elf ranger. We also had 3 supporting NPCs in our party, a dwarf fighter, an elven druid, and the star of the story, a were-rat wild mage named Plar. We were visiting an underground dwarven village that was dealing with monsters that resided deeper in the cave, and we were tasked to investigate. A few hours' trek into the caverns led us to a huge room that was bowl-shaped. After sliding down into the basin, we were immediately engaged by giant sentient mushrooms the size of oak trees. Needless to say, we were taking a beating. When Pilar's first turn came around, our DM made a few rolls for wild magic, sighed, then banged his face into the table a little bit like this a few times. Oh, nat 20 and a concussion. He didn't describe the spell. He didn't even describe Pilar's actions. He just waggled his fingers, thrust them forward, and screamed, "Lobster!" I don't know how, or why, or even if it was legal since it was a homebrew campaign, but Pilar summoned a giant lobster the size of a goddamn Boeing 747, which began wreaking havoc on everything around it. During the confusion, we managed to make it back to our climbing ropes and escape the basin while the lobster was swinging at everything in sight. During its rampage, it slammed into the wall of the cave, which happened to be behind a large reservoir of water. Now the lobster and all of the sentient mushrooms were swimming in this giant basin. And that's when our dwarf, Bored-a-lot, who was built like a tank and had the brains of one, decided to toss something into the water. I'm not sure what it was after all these years, but I think it was a magma stone of some kind. Instantly, the water began to boil, the lobster was instantly flash cooked, and the mushrooms, as described by my DM, were magically delicious. The dwarves, though confused, were eternally grateful for not only solving the monster problem, but also feeding their village for the next 50 or so years. TLDR, went into the caves to deal with monsters, wound up feeding an entire village for life with lobster mushroom bisque. Baby boy Brian here, checking in after the vid. Did you know that we have almost 60% of you that aren't actually subscribed to us but regularly view our content? Well, now you know. So get in here, join our lovely community by hitting that sub button, leaving a like, ringing that bell, and making sure to comment to satisfy the algorithm gods. And also be sure to follow us on Twitch and Twitter, as well as to join the subreddit r/MrRipper if you'd like to submit a story for us to read here in a vid or live on stream. And if you're interested in games, memes, and voice acting dreams, head over on to my YouTube, Brian Von VA, and leave me some love there too. As always, I try to end things on a positive note, and today is no different. I just wanted to say, I hope everybody out there is doing okay. I know everyone is still feeling pretty messed up over everything that's going on in the world. The world is chaotic. It's on fire, for God's sake. How can we not feel messed up, am I right? But no matter what anyone says about you or your problems, big or small, they're big and important to you. And right now, the best thing we can do for you guys and gals out there is continue to entertain all of you and to make sure you guys and gals know you're valid, loved, and wanted. So from me to you, please leave a comment, say hi, and if you see someone who's struggling in the comments below, just say hi to them. Just something small, because you have no idea how 5 minutes of your time might actually make somebody else feel. You could save a life with 5 minutes or 5 frickin' words. So say hi, make sure to ask somebody how they're doing, because you never know what it's going to accomplish. All the love, everybody. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.